Good morning, folks. Welcome back. Let's jump right into it. We made a video about plants, and I made that video, and there was of course a doubt in my mind. I wish I could say everything was planned out. I wish I could say it was a test, and maybe it was a test. Maybe subconsciously, on some level, I was testing myself, and I was testing you, the commenter, to figure it out. To figure out what's the fly in the ointment here? Where's the flaw in this salad, this plant salad? And people, and maybe if you go back and watch the video, maybe I did mention peras, maybe one time, maybe in relation to perfection. But I said morality is pretty much about pursuing the infinite, the eternal, and the perfect. I forgot to put up a third finger for the perfect. That's okay. I said those three things, and as plants strive toward that, they spread and they grow, and if they could, they would simply cover the earth and reign supreme over all other things. They would do that if they could, but of course they're limited in the resources that are provided to them. There is limited sunlight, in the sense that the transference of energy from the sun to the surface of the earth is not infinite. It's a finite, limited amount of energy. That's why solar panels are not a perfect solution to all of your problems, because frankly, solar panels only capture so much energy, and it takes time and energy to transfer that energy from one point to the other, etc., etc., etc. So anyway, when we're talking about plants, and we're talking about plant morality, we did not really mention peras so much, the limiting principle, the death principle, the limited resources, as well as what does it mean to have a beautiful garden. A garden is that which is tended to, that which is limited, that which is cut away. What are the sectars? These sectars are what you use to trim the tree, which makes a more beautiful tree, right? So the principle of peras here is the gardener of humanity is shaping the tree. He's trimming the bushes. He's making interesting patterns. He's putting, a red flower, then a blue flower, then a red flower, then a white flower. He's making a pattern. There is an intentionality to it. So that is what makes a garden beautiful, and there is this mode of peras. And when we talk about peras and limitation, we have to bring up another triad, or another trinity, which is the good, the perfect, and the beautiful. I shouldn't say the perfect. I should say the good, the beautiful, and the truth. Those three things are what I meant to say. Those three things are all limited. Not everything is true. Only some things are true. And there's more nonsense out there than there is truth. Take this in mathematical theory or set theory or whatever. There are more irrational numbers than there are rational numbers. There are infinitely many. Well, there's infinitely many of both, right? There's no limitation to numbers. There are infinitely many numbers. But the ratio of infinity, as you learn in calculus, as you learn in differentiation and integrals and all that good stuff, L'Hospital's rule. I know it's L'Hôpital. L'Hôpital, the French, but L'Hospital, if you want to Google that, it's L'Hospital. L'Hospital's rule talks about how some infinities are bigger than others. So when we look at numbers, we say, well, there's a sort of a finite number of real numbers or rational numbers, or what is the term? Now I sound really stupid. The numbers on the number line, the 1, 2, 3, 4, not natural numbers, integers. I think is the name integer. Oh boy, you try to bring up an analogy to show how smart and well-rounded, what a Renaissance man you are, and then you're rusty on the details. But I know, look, I might not know the details, but I know that there are things out there that prove me right that I don't understand or that I've forgotten. Anyway, whenever we're defining a set or a group, usually something like the real numbers versus maybe the non-real numbers, the rational versus the irrational, the integers versus the non-integers, those decimal points, we're always talking about there's a finite group of one, or not a finite group, again, I'm using the incorrect terminology, but there's a smaller infinity versus a bigger infinity. There's a smaller set versus a bigger set in some way. That if we talk about those things which are true, which is really the point I was trying to make, the things which are true, that's a set of things which are true, and it might be infinite, right? We could infinitely say, well, that is a wall, and that is a door, and that is a window, and that is a car, and that is a bird. and that is a tree, and those are all true things, so we could just go on infinitely, just pointing things out, right? But then we can also say that there are an infinite number of things which are not true, and that infinity is even greater because I can say, that is a car, that is a bird, that is a tree, that is a cloud, and the whole time it was a window, and I said so many more untruths. It's so much easier to generate lies than it is to generate truth. So while we can say there are an infinite number of true things, the number of untrue things is even a larger infinity. And I know that concept of a larger infinity, how is that? That doesn't even make sense. Infinity is infinity. Well, again, calculus, differentiation, integrals, they kind of paint a different portrait of infinity, that there are actually different levels of infinity, different sizes. We can say that one infinity is bigger than another, and so on and so forth. So, you know, in when you're talking about convergence, you know, what is as x goes to infinity, you know, you have certain functions. It's like, you know, 1 over e to the x or something like that. Those sort of functions where it's like, well, you know, maybe it fluctuates, or you're not really sure what's going on, and you have to use things like differentiation. But that's all fun stuff. That's all good stuff. The same thing applies to beauty. You know, the number of things which are beautiful. If you try to draw a picture of me, now maybe you're experienced, maybe it's going to be a beautiful picture. But if you're not experienced, there are so many mistakes you can make. You can make my eyes too far apart. You can make them too narrow. You can make my nose too big. You can make it too small. You can make my mouth too big. You can make it too small. Dimensionality, shadowing, okay, the shape, the geometry of everything. You can make something too triangular, too square. When you're talking about curvatures, you can make something too convex versus concave. So there are all kinds of mistakes you can make when you're trying to visually represent something, especially a face, which a face is one of the things we are most sensitive to in this world in terms of visual stimulus. We are more sensitive to people's faces than almost any other thing. Maybe, you know, other sexual aspects of the human body we're pretty sensitive to. But the human face, because it's even a prepubescent thing. Sexuality, a huge deal of sexuality is post-pubescent. You know, I remember as a kid, I was like, I hear these rappers, you know. I hear Sir Mix a lot, and he's talking about how, you know, even white guys got to shout about these rappers' girlfriends' butts, and I didn't get it at the time. Can anyone sympathize with this? I did not get it at the time. I sort of understood. I think there's like a more primordial, you know, breast association because that's something that infants. I mean, I guess there's a whole Freudian thing you could go into there, but I don't know. The idea of boobs being attractive made sense to me because I'm like, boobs have to be hidden. Now maybe you go to a place like Russia, and you know they don't have. You know, we're getting into the territory of weird stuff here. But they just don't expect, until a girl is post-pubescent, they don't expect girls to wear bikini tops. They don't expect them to wear swimsuit tops. Whereas we have like bikini tops for little girls. I mean, the whole fashion industry around swimming and societal norms and sexualization and all of these things are very complicated and very controversial. But I think all I was really trying to say, I think I was talking about the face. And then I diverted into, okay, maybe sexual images are also equally powerful to the face. But I was trying to say that the face is sort of before all of that because I think there is a process of sexualization that happens. People could argue with me. There are, of course, people who argue that like infants have a sexuality and sort of things like this, that infants are masturbating in the womb. And we can say that, we can recognize that. But I think at the end of the day, I have to say sexuality is a spectrum. And I think clearly we can say that sexual interest, sexual development is something that happens over time. We're not just born expressing all of that genetic potential the moment that we are a baby. That is something that comes out over things like puberty. And I just didn't understand the obsession with butts. And then as I matured, I started to maybe appreciate and say, ah, now I understand, now I see where people are coming from, and now my instincts are revealing themselves, these phenotypes are expressing themselves. So, and maybe you could say a feminist perspective would be something like, no, you were acculturated to sexualize women's bodies. It's like, is that even a bad thing? I mean, is that a bad thing? Does anyone ever ask that question? I guess it's a bad thing if you're a woman and you hate people sexualizing your body. But if you just want, what is your goal here? To make people not sexualize women's bodies. So what are they going to do? Sexualize men's bodies? You know, they're going to sexualize something. That's, I guess, the thing about sex is this energy we have, and it's got to latch onto something. You know, if you're in a monogamous relationship, you sexualize your partner, and you do not sexualize, supposedly, if you're a good monogamous person, you don't sexualize other people. So you are taking your sexual energy and you are channeling it and you are attaching that sexual energy to a specific person or object. People can sexualize anime characters. They can sexualize hentai. We can sexualize pictures on a screen. People sexualize me. I'm sorry, you know, and I hate to say it. And I guess I understand the feminists when they say we don't want to be sexualized, because I understand there is, again, this primordial kind of, you know, when you feel sexualized, you feel that you're in the passive position. No one likes to be in the passive position. If you're a man, I think that is generally true. I think women have some weird fantasies. Again, it's hard to get in the mind of other people. You can look at certain studies about fantasies that women have about being in the passive position in multiple levels, being physically the subject of aggression, the idea of being aggressed upon, many different ways. This seems to appeal to women. So women really do fetishize being in the passive position, but I think most people, the idea of being sexualized to them, if you're an aggressive person, an assertive person, if you value masculinity or agency or one or the other, then being sexualized, especially when the person who's sexualizing you is not attractive at all. I think it's one thing if the book club sexualizes you and says you're cute, and you're like, you know, I have to reject your advances for XYZ reasons, but you know, that is not nearly as bad as when someone who is older and someone who is maybe a little bit heavier, more fat, and they're not as attractive, and their proportions, their face is a little bit off, and they're kind of in an uncanny valley, and they're sexualizing you, then you're like, I don't want to be in the passive position in relation to this person. I would be happier to be in the passive position if someone was, you know, handsome, successful. They had admirable traits, and they said, you're such a handsome young man. And then I'm like, oh, thank you, I appreciate that. Whereas, like, a smelly homeless guy comes up to you and says, hey, you're such a handsome young man. And then we kind of get creeped out. So we understand the feminists. We understand why feminists don't like to be sexualized. Because really it's an anti-beta strategy. It is you're setting the threshold of creepiness very high. You're saying, you know, anytime a man asks a woman out for coffee, that is creepy, that is sexual assault, that is sexual harassment, they should be put in jail or killed or castrated. So really what you're doing is you're setting your beta tolerance threshold, you're sort of setting it very high, and you're creating a sexual environment where men are just, they're sort of in a bad place unless they go above some certain threshold. You know, they get to that Harvey Weinstein tier where, you know, he looks like a creepy guy. I wouldn't like to see him, you know, mess around with the ficus. You know, he would not be on my top list. Let's say if I had to make a list of people I would want to see get it on with the ficus, and I had to order them from, you know, least offensive to most offensive, he would kind of be in the most offensive category. And yet he got away with it because he was so powerful. And so feminism is really an authoritarian strategy, is an authoritarian. The promotion of feminism takes women and it makes them extremely intolerant of a larger and larger percentage of men. And people can argue with this. People have argued with me. They've said, oh, well, you know, our militant vegan, and he's not a vegan, the militant vegetarian, our resident militant vegetarian, he's made the argument, oh, things aren't as bad as, and the dating scene is great, and white men have it great. and this kind of thing. But I think if we isolate things and take it piece by piece and part by part, because we can all make generalizations. I can make them, you can make them, but if we take it piece by piece, then we see, okay, feminism is about disqualifying men from the dating pool. It is not about opening up the dating pool. That is sometimes what feminism pretends to be. Oh, feminism, we like beta males, and we like weak guys, and we like guys who are equal partners, and we like cucks, and we like polyamory. And feminism pretends all these things, but when you look at the statistics and life outcomes and what actually happens in the end of the story, is these people, a lot of people are eliminated from not just the dating pool, but from the sexual marketplace, and not just the sexual marketplace, but from the reproductive marketplace, I think is the more significant aspect. Because a feminist could go around having sex with all kinds of people. You could have a feminist sex worker who goes around having sex with everybody. The beta, the alpha, she's having sex with everybody. But at the end of the day, feminism excludes, says that no man is good enough to sire children with her. No man is good enough. Whereas, prior to feminism or alternatives to feminism would say that you're a woman and you need to find a husband. Very different paradigm from I'm a feminist, no man is good enough, I might have sex with all of them, but I'm not going to have kids. So there's levels to this. There is the romantic dating level. There is the sexual level, the carnal, physical level. There is the reproductive level, which has been separated from the carnal because of birth control and contraceptives, which is an innovation in the last 200 years. But we see those different levels, and we see the ways in which they parallel, but sometimes they come apart, sometimes they diverge, and sometimes they are in contradistinction to one another, where again, you can have a feminist who might say, yeah, I'll have sex with anybody, I'm a sex worker, I'll just do it for money, but at the same time, she's not getting pregnant with any of them, she's not looking to start a family with any of them, and she has very little romantic attraction to any of them. And in fact, she might be a man-hater, she might hate men in a certain sense, versus a woman who has sex with only one man in her life, but she loves him, she's devoted to him, she has children with him. So we can see these different paradigms. And all of this is really going off the main topic, which was about butts, and it was about, we were getting into sex because we're talking about the face, so we're talking about the beauty of the face, and we're talking about the specificity of the face. And that the face is like a fingerprint, and it's almost, and some people have trouble with this. I understand there are certain parts of the brain, again, this is not acculturation, this is not something you learn necessarily, but there are certain parts of the brain which are skilled at analyzing faces and telling two different people apart and remembering faces. Certain people are good at remembering names, certain people are good at remembering faces, some people are good at both. I tend to be able to remember and recall at any given time. Very quickly off the bat, I can remember and recall the 200 people, I would say in terms of man hours, I would say if you took a pie chart in the last couple months or couple years, and you looked at the number of hours that I spent with certain people and talking to them and using their name, and you made a sort of chart and you looked at, who's a chunk on that chart, you have to kind of make up more than 0.5%. I would say that of that chart, I can remember maybe, it's not like a Dunbar's number, it's not like I can remember only 200 names at a time, but it's like, I have to spend a certain threshold of a number of hours talking, conversing, referencing a person in order for them to be in my chart to instantly recall their name. If you just introduce it to me once, it's in one ear, out the other. It's that 7-time rule. I need to kind of like hear the name, use the name 7 times, and then it's stuck with me for a while. But then new names come in, and etc. And I've analyzed that phenomenon in myself in terms of my own capacity for memory, but my capacity for remembering faces is vast, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's autism, maybe I have an autistic. It's funny because autism, generally the way people think about autism is it's antisocial, which it can be like that. It can be antisocial in the sense that it's not schizophrenic. Schizophrenics, they just make association. So they see a person, they just want to start talking to them. There's a sociality in schizophrenia, where autism is this focus, this hyper-focus on objects and things. So you'd think that remembering faces would be a social function, and it is. But really, remembering names is probably a little more of a social function, or having both of them. But if you can just remember faces, there's a kind of an artistic obsession with the form of the face and being able to remember the specificity of the face, over long periods of time. Now, again, there are exceptions to this, especially as people age. I don't know how far back, how many years my facial memory goes into. And there's also a lot of interesting things about memory where it seems, again, that memories are not lost or deleted, but they're sort of shuffled down the priorities list, and certain thresholds mean that in day-to-day life we can't remember certain things, but under certain conditions such as hypnosis or radical changes in your life, emotional trauma, whatever, can sort of bring up old memories. So they're never really deleted or extinguished. They're always somewhere in there, but they're very hard to bring out. And so people will say things like, I forgot. But in reality, we don't forget much of anything, from what I can see. And again, I could be wrong about that. There could be truly such a thing as a lost memory. Sometimes people say, well, I got blackout drunk and I don't remember what happened. I think that's more of a problem of perception of the short-term memory was never created, and therefore it never entered into the long-term memory. So we talk about the distinction between those two. But I think once something goes into your long-term memory, I don't think it ever comes out. I think it's always there in some sense. And can only be destroyed, I guess, with the destruction of the brain itself, which houses all these memories. So we're talking about stuff, we're talking about things, we're talking about faces. We were really just talking about beauty, and I just went off on a tangent. Maybe you can see beauty, aesthetics, it's important, it's interesting. So beauty, yeah, I mean, there's only one me. Like, you can mess up my face slightly, and then it looks horribly wrong and horribly off, and it looks like a caricature. To really get my face perfect, or your face, or anyone's face, you have to stay within peras, you have to stay within certain contours and certain specifications. And if you get out of that even slightly, it can look off, it can look bad, it can look horrible and terrible. We now have all kinds of apps that can change a person's face slightly, and you can see different variations on a face, which is interesting. And if you're able to do that intuitively, that's when you can start looking at groups of people who have similar faces and guessing at things like what is their ancestry, not just continentally, but specifically what ethnicity are they a part of. And that's something I've always been interested in. And again, is it a perfect thing? No, because certain ethnicities are mixed, and they contain different strands or strings of alleles and different subpopulations. And you also have the recessive factor of you can have two parents who are not redheaded, and they can have a redheaded child. That is genetically possible. It's unlikely, but it's possible when you have that combination of recessive genes. So, there are all kinds of populations, like if you take a Middle Eastern population and a Latin American population and a Mediterranean population and, some of these sorts of different populations, and you look at them and compare them, people can get confused because when you mix together radically different populations, you can get a huge variety of results from that. It is not just a paint pot mixing together of two colors and everything comes out mocha. It's actually, you can have, again, when you have mixed race siblings, you can have one who is much more white, one who is much darker, and you can get that differentiation even among siblings who are supposed to be genetically identical, but the way that the genes arrange themselves and express themselves phenotypically can create vastly different results. So that's where you get difficulties and problems. When you have a relatively homogeneous nation that has been stable over time, that has a lot of barriers and things of this nature, it can develop certain typical types, and you can develop certain core types. Sometimes you look at different ethnic types and you can say, oh, that's a classic type of this region or a classic type of that region. Doesn't mean that people are not going to be then, on edge cases or whatever. So that's a little diatribe. That is a little off topic, little rant I just went on, a scathing rant. But we were really talking about peras, and we were really talking about the fact that plant growth, if it's not limited, then it's gross. So let's go to a few of our commenters that we wanted to shout out a few commenters today. Let's see how the commenters are doing. We have Pete Bosboom, who says, morality seems to be more about intention rather than behavior. And I want to go off on that because, to me, that's wrong, but it's an interesting point because I think in the animal kingdom, we do not have a differentiation between intention and behavior. Intention, behavior, the exact same thing. The lion wants to kill you, the lion kills you. The gazelle wants to run away, it runs away. There is very little division in nature between intention and action. Now, when you get to humanity, we have this ability to have an intention. Oh, I want to kill that guy, but because I'm civilized and domesticated, I'm conscious, I engage with abstract morality and societal codes, I'm going to restrain myself in my behavior, which you can say is good, but I say that creates a problem, and that creates the potentiality for all kinds of perversions. In the animal kingdom, we would say if an animal wants to do something and it can't, that's because it's sick, or because it's disabled, or because it's malformed, or it's a mutant. If it wants to do something but it can't do something. And so that is kind of the state of humanity and civilization, is that civilization allows us to restrain bad intention, or to restrain bad behaviors and to fight against our intention. And we say that that's what makes us good civilized people. It also introduces a huge and wide variety of perversions and accidents and problems. And I think this is evident in depression and anxiety. Someone's depressed. It's like, oh, I don't want to be sad, but I am sad. It's like, well, just stop being sad. Oh, well, I can't. I don't know. I feel sad, and my intention is to be happy, but my behavior is sadness. You know, that is a huge problem. Or anxiety, social anxiety, shyness. Oh, I want to talk to this girl, but I can't because, I'm just too scared. And it's like, well, what do you have to lose? Rational calculation doesn't matter. So they have, and maybe I guess the semantics of how I'm portraying this could be self-defeating. If we say, oh, well, it's I guess how do we classify certain things? Do we classify them as intentions, or do we classify them as behaviors? I intend to be a good person, but then my behavior is bad. That's bad, right? If the lion intends to kill you and the lion kills you, in a way, that's good. The lion did as the lion should. It did according to its nature. It intended to kill you, and it killed you. Okay, yeah, we might be sad you're dead, but the lion is not evil. The lion is just doing as it does, and there is still beauty in the lion. Now, if you intend to be a good person, let's say you intend to, save someone's life, but you don't because you're a coward. You intend to speak the truth, but you don't because you're a coward, because you're scared of the consequences. If your intention is good and your behavior is bad, that's what I call perversion. If your intention is bad and your behavior is bad, if the lion's intention is to kill you and the lion kills you, I'm like, the lion is internally consistent, the lion is harmonious with its own nature, so I can't call that evil. But if your intention is, I want to be a good person, but in all actuality I'm a bad person, I want to do my homework, but I procrastinate, I call that evil, I call that perverse. So to me, actually, immorality, or a lack of morality, doesn't seem to be about the distinction between intention and behavior. That doesn't really matter to me. What seems to matter is when you have a discrepancy. Because I would submit that if intention is a purely conscious thing, which I don't think it is, but if it was purely conscious and purely in the realm of humanity, and there was no such thing as an animal intention, that only humans can have intentions, I think that's wrong, but let's run with it for a second. If that was true, then that would mean that because animals don't have intentions, therefore they cannot be moral, which is, I think, a typical or a common view, that animals are amoral. They don't have morality because they don't have any intention. Whereas humans can be moral, and we can also be immoral because we have intentions, and if we fall through on them, we are moral. If we don't fall through with them, we are immoral. If we intend to be good and we are instead evil, then we are immoral. If we intend to be good and we are good, then we've been moral. So, this this scheme is popular, but what I would say is that plants can be moral, animals can be moral, and they do have intention, and their intention is to be the best, to be true to their nature and to be the best that they can be, to strive toward divinity in their own niche way. And the plant does that by growing and by reproducing. Animals do that by reproducing. We do that by reproducing to an extent. But they have different types of reproduction. There's asexual, sexual reproduction. There's also not just physical reproduction, but there's cultural reproduction, mimetic reproduction, linguistic reproduction, spiritual or religious reproduction. So there's all sorts of levels of that. We can look at the different types of that. So I would say that is a kind of morality, and I would say that immorality only comes into the picture with Satan in the garden giving, hey, he says, here is a sweet fruit. And Adam's intention, he says, I don't want to eat that. God told me not to. But his action is different from his intention. So that's when immorality is introduced, and this rift, consciousness and abstraction creates a rift that allows for intention to be separate from behavior. And that's where perversion comes up, when you get people who say, you know, when you have someone who is just an animal, someone who is a violent animal, in a sense you can respect that person as an animal. A violent criminal, in a sense we can respect a violent criminal as a violent criminal. He does what he intends to do. And the solution to that from a pro-civilizational standpoint, pro-libertarian, classical liberal standpoint, is to say, oh, we're going to stop the criminal. We're going to imprison the criminal, kill the criminal, in some way inhibit the criminal so the criminal can't do what he wants. But in his own universe, in his own Viking, his own gangster, his own mafioso, whatever, he has his own rule and his own law, the law of thieves, the law of criminals, and he abides by his own law. And this is why people can respect gangsters and gangster rap. There is something moral to gangster rap. I hate to say it. Maybe I don't hate to say it, but it's just a funny thing. It's just a funny thing that gangster rap is more moral than people who claim to, do one thing and then do another. Because gangster rap is internally consistent on some level. But maybe on another level it's not consistent because it claims, yeah, we're hard gangsters, but we're actually supporting, I don't want to say cultural Marxism, but, that's a shorthand for, gangster rap purports to be about violence in the streets, but oftentimes it's really just, being listened to by, white suburbanite children who are not, coinciding with that behavior, but it's kind of a weird, post-metaphysical, a kind of a hyper-modern state that we live in. Maybe hyper-modern isn't correct because this, of course, was happening in the 1990s before the internet. But maybe, I don't know what the controversy, maybe we'd have to have John on the show, John David Ebert. We'd have to discuss, do you think that rap music is hyper-modern? And we would have to listen to what John David Ebert would have to say about that. I think rap music is, if we are to say there was a real period known as the hypermodern period, which comes after postmodernism, then I would say you have to say that rap music is clearly hypermodern. There's clearly something, maybe people can make arguments about, well, it has to do with race, and it has to do with the fall of white supremacy, it has to do with this and that. I don't know. I don't know about that. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But it's an interesting thing. I'd love to have a discussion. Let's have a dialogue. So we can discuss that. We can discuss rap music. But I think to the extent that something is internally consistent is the extent to which we can admire it in its own sense. For its own, we can say, you know what, I may have to kill you as your enemy, but I can admire you in the sense that you were true to your own goals and beliefs. Whereas the person who's like, well, I would love to do this, but I'm just too scared, and I'm too lazy, and they're making all these excuses, which frankly, I do it as much as I do it more than everybody else. That's why I'm so hard about it. That's why, I only appear to beat up others because you're just a proxy for myself. Is that too real for you? Is that going too deep with it? Is that scary? Is that scary to think about? I guess so. But it is true, right? It is true that, and I think this is true for a lot of people, that we we most aggressively call out or get angered by or are incensed by sins that we ourselves feel vulnerable to. You know, if you see, I guess, and maybe this is wrong, maybe this is the opposite of the truth. I don't know, but I think it is the case that I'm not exempt from this. That when I say that there is a difference between, when I say that immorality is when your intention doesn't match your behavior, and I say that, I don't say that as someone who, I am just the natural man, and I am just the pre-Adamic man, and I'm just walking around the earth, and my intention and my behavior matches up perfectly. That's not what I'm saying. I think people who speak much on morality are oftentimes, you assume that just because someone talks a lot about morality that someone is a very moral person. I see these caricatures of me where people imagine that I am just some kind of, again, like some kind of monk in a temple. I see it and it's kind of funny to me, and I guess I don't go out of my way to correct it and say, no, I'm actually a terrible person, because it's like, okay, well, relative to the base population. And no one likes to hear the self-pity, which is why I stay away from it as much as possible. Now, maybe we'll divert from that plan in this video a little bit, but always self-criticism is not helpful. You know, it doesn't make a good video. If we're thinking about what is the purpose of a video, if I just complain on the video about how bad a person I am, is that going to help you? No. All that is going to do is it's encouraging self-pitying behavior in you. And then we're just having a pity party. So, you know, I try to stay away from that. But there's always that asterisk, that caveat, that someone who talks a lot about morality is not necessarily a moral person. We see this with the Heinbachs of the world. People who talk every day about morality and how they're so hard in the paint about morality, and then, of course, we know what they're doing behind the scenes. So that's always an asterisk, always a caveat. You have to know it. You have to understand it. That talking about something and doing it, and sometimes the people who talk most about something are some of the people who are the most egregious. And probably the reason why they talk about it so much is because they feel guilty about it because of how bad they are as a person. That's also a possibility. So we're always having to keep that asterisk and that caveat as we go on. We always want to maintain that level. I wouldn't say cynicism. I wouldn't say it's about hating people or being cynical or being pessimistic necessarily. You can, I guess, interpret it in that way, but I think it's more about always verifying, or always being skeptical in a way, or always checking. Doing due diligence, I think, is an important concept. Don't just assume that people are good. You know, I would say the default hypothesis, you don't walk up to someone, you know, I guess prejudices aside, if you have information that can serve prejudice. But if I just say, I have a person, is that person moral or immoral? The pessimist says, well, of course, the person is immoral because people suck. It's like the Joker take. Everyone's so awful these days, right? That's the pessimistic approach. The optimistic approach is, oh, I'm sure they're a sweet little angel. And that's, of course, we know that to be, you know, something unfortunately associated with Christianity. And it's a pretty bad take, and it's just a pretty, you know, bad outlook to just assume that everyone's a perfect little angel. It's a very motherly approach that is necessary for raising babies, not so good at running a society, and in fact is used, that ideology is spread to undermine the middle class. But if you have, let's say you have a unknown person, you just say, are they good or bad? We have to say we don't know. We don't know if they're good or bad. In relation to what? In relation to what society? I need more information. So it's not about looking at people and saying, oh, you know, and this is something that people often will say about, oh, if you are homophobic, you must be closeted gay. I don't think that is always true, but I also don't think it's always false. I think we do have examples of it being of not always being false. So we just can't make we can't know until we verify. We have to do due diligence, which is hard. You have to get to know someone, and that's hard because people put on a front, people act as characters, people are good, people put on the mask. You don't really know that you can live with someone, you can be married to someone, not know who they truly are until you know, accidentally, you know, log into their MySpace account and find all of their furry fanfic. So, you know, you really never know, right? You never know until you do your due diligence. And can you ever do that? Can you ever really, truly do your due diligence? I'm not sure, you know, because people are always, you think you've done it, and then people evolve and people change. So it's a world out there. It's a life we're living. It's an amazing time. It's fascinating. We'd love to talk about it. We're at 40 minutes, and we wanted to talk about intention versus behavior. But let's get to the second Pete Bosboom, or Bosbaum. I don't know. Pete, it sounds like a Dutch name, so maybe it's Bosbaum. You're going to have to tell me, Mr. Bosboom. I like Bosbaum better. I just like it. To be in accordance with natural law, or as Chris Langan calls it, to be in accordance with coherence, seems to be pretty all right by you. Seems to be... Okay, I forgive him. He's not a native English speaker. Seems to be pretty all right by you. Can also subtract some bad behaviors from this idea. His idea is also that reality will always lean toward coherence, for example, evolution, and eventually incoherence. What was before the Big Bang or creation, he calls it unbound telesis, will lose. Okay, interesting. Interesting, Pete Bosboom. You know, Chris Langan is a smart guy, and he has a vocabulary, and if someone wanted to, you know, learn about Chris Langan, there's a lot of stuff there. You know, I don't understand. People are so obsessed with politics, which, like, politics is something that you have the lead. Politics is you're cucking yourself. If you ever think about politics, and again, not exempt from it, and have done a lot of it in the past, not exempt from it. But if you think about politics for even one moment, you are cucking yourself, because essentially you're saying you're watching, you know, the deep state ramming away at the American public, and you're sitting there in the corner and you're like, yeah, you know, and you're not doing it maybe in that sense, and please don't clip that out, but you're doing it in the sense of like, oh no, don't, you're like that guy, you're like, no, please, I'm a virgin, no, don't do it, no, I'm a virgin. You're doing it in that way, but you're still being cucked, right? The extent to which you think about politics and you obsess about politics, you're like, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that. Maybe we could form an alliance with Russia and China to create nationalism in 100 years. Maybe we could have an ethno-state. Maybe we could infiltrate the Republican Party. Maybe we could infiltrate the Democrat Party. Maybe we could start our own religious cult. Maybe we could do this or that. And it's like, I guess, I guess you're just going to have to prove me wrong on this one. I guess you're just going to have to prove me wrong. But I guess what I'm saying is that, to me, people imagine, especially people who are into the 4-year cycles, people are like, oh, is it going to be Trump or this person or that person? And I get there's immediacy, and I get people being censored, and I get, and look, red ice is gone. Let's just say it, red ice is gone. We know who's next. It's not going to be me. It's going to be somebody else. We know who's next. That day is going to come. It's going to be a sad day. We're all gonna be sad. Because we like these quirky people. We like we might even disagree with these people. We might even hate these. Hate is a strong word, but you can hate somebody, and also it can be a love-hate relationship. You can hate somebody and be entertained. It's like Trump. It's like the left. Yeah, they hate Trump, but they're also entertained. They're going to be sad when he's gone. And so even if we are just hardcore leftists and we hate the right wing, they're still entertaining, and we're going to be sad when they're gone. So eventually everything's going to pass away, right? But, in politics, there's a lot. Here's what I'll say about politics. Just as a well-rounded, trying to take into account all of the counter-arguments and people who disagree with me, is that maybe someday your political plan will come to fruition and you'll laugh at me and you'll say, you're a loser and you didn't help and you're going to jail because you didn't help the revolution. And so you're going to hell in one way or another. And at that point, I'll say, I guess you were right, and I guess I'm going to have to burn in hell. But here's the thing. I think politics, like the nature of truth, there's really, I mean, there are a lot of ways to go wrong, and there's a lot of time to be wasted in politics, and it is a form of cucking when you think, oh, I'm going to get so involved in this political process, and it's all just a show, and it's all just pretend. It's all just fake, you know. There's a lot of paths of time wasting in video gaming and simulation within politics. There's different levels of simulation that you can get stuck in. You can get to some level, look down at the people below you, say, I'm red-pilled, and all those people are novices and amateurs, and they don't know what's going on, but I know what's going on, and you don't know what's going on. You know, you've just gotten to a second level of simulation where now you're looking down at the simulants below you and saying, oh, they're so stupid, but you're stuck in your own little simulation. So what I like about philosophy and Chris Langan is that Chris Langan, he's dealing with the truth. He's dealing with things that you don't have to be in power. You don't have to be a dictator or a billionaire. You don't have to have money. You don't have to have power to interact with philosophy, and philosophy can impact you in a deep way. So all these people are spending their time on politics, and I'm like, really? You should be spending your time on philosophy. And again, that's not the way I did it, but it's honestly the way that it should be done for many different reasons. And so I look at someone like Mr. Doolittle, who has assembled a cult around himself of people who are trying to understand. So he uses these terms in complete contradiction with every other philosopher. And so he has his complete semiology and his own vocabulary. We have to decode that and understand that. And they're spending all these hours and hours reading boomer Facebook posts to try to understand the mind of Doolittle and the proprietarian system. But where's the cult of Chris Langan? That's what I want to know. I want to see the cult. I want to see Chris Langan evangelize. I want to see a Chris Langanite knocking on my door at 3 in the morning, handing out pamphlets about Chris Langan. I haven't even read Chris Langan, you know. So this is hypocrisy, right? This is the sin. My intention of being a Chris Langan cultist is thwarted by my sinful nature and my lack of participation and adherence to the practice of Chris Langanism. But Chris Langan, I think, if you're going to pick a boomer to aggrandize and to worship and to understand his semiology and his vocabulary and his semantics, which is all very convoluted and weird, you got to choose. I mean, if it's Doolittle versus Langan, you got to choose Langan. How is it even a choice? How are people not doing this? Again, if people say, oh, well, we have our own forum, and they have a Patreon, and this and that. It's like, well, if I'm not getting a knock at the door at 3 in the morning, waking me up and being like, quick, here's Chris Langan's book or something, you know, shoves it into my head, quick, read this before you die, like, this is really important, and then, like, runs away off to the next door. If that doesn't happen, then the Langanites are not doing enough. You're not doing enough, okay? So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun when I do get that 3 a.m. knocking at my door. Brian G., who I think is different from Henry Benjamin. See, they both have kind of these just stereotypical names. Henry Benjamin has just gone full materialist on us and saying that, oh, well, if you're not a materialist, you're a cuck living in the world of, you know, religion is a psyop that the powerful use to control people. And they promise, you know, if you do what the powerful say, you'll go to heaven. And if you break the you know, interests of the banksters or you know, just some elites or whatever, you go against the elites and you're going to hell. You know, that's their little game that they play. And everything about the soul and all of this stuff is a psyop against you. That's the complete opposite, right? That's the complete opposite. Actually, the psyop is telling you that you're small, unimportant, and you should kill yourself. That is the psyop against you, and the way that they convince you of that is by stripping you of religion and the dignity of your soul. So that is the psyop. So that is, I regard, you know, Henry Benjamin, he's kind of deep in enemy territory here. He's proselytizing his materialism to us, and we understand it. We understand what he's doing. And why does he do it? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Why does Obelisk respect or do what he does? Why do these people do it? Maybe it's a troll. Maybe I've done it in the past. Maybe I still do it. You know, that's another deep question we have to understand. Why do people do these things? Why are people sadistic? Why does this happen? Does it make you feel powerful? Does it make you feel better than other people? I don't know, maybe so. But we're talking about Brian G's comment. I'm sorry, Brian G. You just have a very uninspiring name. He said molds are fungi. True. I fact check me on that one. They are not plants. They are fungi, which are vital parts of the ecosystem. I think moss are not fungi. I think moss are plants. So similar to fungi, but not a fungi technically. Which brings me to the concept of weeds. What are weeds? No one likes dandelions in their nice grass lawns. I like dandelions. I think they're pretty. I think they're colorful. I think they're bright like the sun. I think, I'm going to start crying about the dandelion genocide that goes on a daily basis with these lawnmowers just killing all these dandelions because they're beautiful. They smell like butter. It's like you rub them on your chin and then, you pluck little petals. Dandelions are beautiful. They're part of a childhood dream. Who would want to kill them? All these people with the perfectly manicured lawns. This is a sickness. This 1950s America, you're sick. You're sick and disgusting. These pure green lawns, no. We need dandelions everywhere. We need fields of dandelions. That's what I'm about. I think grass is a weed. That's what I think. I think we should have dandelions and flowers and tall grass and and wheat fields. I'm a fan of wheat fields. How could anyone not like wheat fields? So, yeah, I guess I understand. If you're an aristocrat and you look around and 99% of the land is like farmland or forest or prairie, and then you're an aristocrat and you're like, oh, I'm going to do something zany and different, and I'm going to have this like neatly trimmed, like this is before lawnmowers, I'm going to like neatly trim my lawn so it's all just pure green grass. And I'm like, okay, you're doing something unique. You're doing something different. This shows your wealth and power. Okay, I get it, Mr. Aristocrat. Like, you're a cool guy. You're part of the Mr. Cool Mug Club. But when everyone does that in 1950s America, then I'm like, okay, this is sick. This is messed up. There's a problem here. Let the grass grow. Let the dandelion sprout. We spend lots of money killing weeds with chemicals. Could the chemicals kill us? Who cares? We're killing dandelions. I'm going to fix that. And I'm also going to burp. I feel indigestion. Excuse me. We're not supposed to burp. That's rude. But I did say excuse me. So that negates the burp. Who cares? We're killing dandelions so we can have a nice grass lawn so the neighbors don't make fun of us on the HOA. What is that? Housing of Authority? Homeowners Association group on Facebook. We hate mold on our bread and our food. It's so nasty and ruins the food. Mold is where we get cheese. So we actually we try not to eat too much dairy because there's problems with that. Unless you're like a Bantu tribes, you're like a specific tribe. I think the Igbo in Nigeria. Unless you're like from the Igbo tribe, or unless you're like 100% Scandinavian. There's another one, percent. Unless you're like Northern European, like to the max, where you have this extreme daily tolerance, then dairy's problematic. It's problematic for 90% of people in the world could do without dairy. There is a small percentage of people in the world who are really lactose tolerant. They are an aberration. Most people in the world, dairy's not good for you. Even white people. Sorry to say this, European Americans, all you people out there, you think, oh, milk is so good. And yeah, if you're a kid, you can drink a lot of milk. There's a problem, though, that milk actually contains a lot of estrogen because of the pasteurization process and other aspects of how, cattle are being filled with all kinds of estrogen. They're filled with estrogen because, again, the only dairy cows are all female. And you have to understand that in order to produce milk, there's a hormonal process that activates the lactating process in cows. So to keep them stimulated, to keep them in that maternal mode, they are pumped full of estrogen hormones. And these estrogen hormones then get into the milk, and then you're drinking straight estrogen. So people are like, oh, you're a soy boy. Well, how about a milk boy? How about a milky boy? How about all you milky boys that are drinking straight estrogen? So, admittedly, milk has a lot of nutrients. It has protein. It has everything that you could possibly ever need. But you should only drink human milk. and I hate to say it. I love to say it. But it's a love-hate relationship with what I'm about to say. You should only drink milk straight from the udder. Only straight from the teat. So you're going to have to get down under that cow, or you're going to have to find a willing woman. In any case, factory farmed, look, we agree with the militant vegetarian. Factory farmed meats and products and dairy products are no good for you. They're pumped full of all sorts of bad stuff. You have estrogen. So I'm sorry, I wish you could drink milk. You can't drink it. It's full of estrogen. Don't feed estrogen. Don't feed milk to your kids because it's estrogen juice, and you're going to make your kids transgender. That's part of the whole thing. I mean, we love to see transgender kids. We love to see the mutilation of children's genitals. We love to see it. We want more of it. But we do need to make an informed choice here, that if you are feeding your children this factory farmed milk, unless you have your own cattle, and you're not using pesticides, because remember, pesticides have xenoestrogens. If you live out in the Alaska, I don't know where you are that you're free from, because of course the rain has, you've got acid rain, and you've got leaching, and if you have a neighbor and he's using pesticides, it's going to drift over into your plot of land. So there's all sorts of issues. The idea that you can actually get away from this stuff is pretty hard. But let's say you live on a private island, you have your own private cows, you have a glass dome over the island, so it's like a closed ecosystem, there's no pollution, and your cattle are eating the grass, and then you're directly sucking the teat of the cow. Then it's great. Then you've got protein. I mean, still, the cow, I guess, maybe there's some level of estrogen because, of course, the cow is in a heightened state of estrogen levels because it's lactating, which, animals are not supposed to be lactating for their entire adult lives. They're supposed to only lactate when they have offspring, which, for cattle are pretty big animals. They don't have like 50 little cattle. I don't know what the average in the wild, how many little cattle a cow would have over its lifetime, but, it's not enough to justify the kind of simulation of pregnancy that we do with these cows. So, maybe there is a solution. Maybe there's a world. Maybe, whenever they came out with, all these synthetic hormones, following World War II, the Germans were, I believe, the first to synthesize testosterone, and then estrogen came after that, I believe, and so on and so forth. So maybe if you go prior to the 1940s, maybe you can find all this good, delicious milk that's healthy, full of protein, and we love to drink it, and we love to drink the milk, and it's tasty. But today, even if you're lactose tolerant, probably shouldn't drink milk. It's probably full of estrogen, so probably don't drink it. And then 90% of people, you're probably not part of the special Igbo Nordic club of people who are just these superhuman freak mutants who can just drink milk all the time. Everyone can do it as a baby. Everyone is lactose tolerant as a baby. You're going to drink your mom's milk. It's all good. It's fresh. In fact, you need to do that. This synthetic milk stuff is terrible. It's evil. It's terrible. You need to be drinking. If you have a baby, if you see a mother with a baby and she's not breastfeeding, shame her. Be like, whip those breasts out and get that baby fed right now. And if you don't, call the police. I don't know. I don't know that the police are going to do much. I don't know that calling the police is legal in that situation. But you got to do something, right? You got to do something which is legal. But you have to shame people about this because women, first of all, there have been studies about, that's like the citation needed on Wikipedia point. Like when I say there have been studies about, it's kind of like, well, I heard this thing once, and I think there might have been studies about it, so I'm just going to say it with authority, with whatever little authority I have. So anyway, when a woman goes through childbirth, it's painful, right? And then the child is born, and there's this relief and wave of euphoria. And the mother looks at her child, and there's this extreme attachment, not just to the physical child, but the abstract notion of the child, the concept of the child. And so that moment is really what binds a mother and a child together. And by using painkillers and all this modern medicine and C-sections, you're basically causing women to stop loving their kids. And I hate to say it, but it seems to be true. It seems to be true that you have these women who are like, my son was a mistake, and I hate my son, and he's a loser. A lot of this stuff, again, came out of the post-World War II era with these mothers who didn't have to go through the pain of childbirth, and so they turn out to be really abusive mothers. In some cases, produced a couple of serial killers. If we look at their biographies, we can see these very cruel, disgusting mothers. So really, you have to put women through the pain. If you don't put them through the pain of childbirth, then they're going to be like, well, breastfeeding is painful, so I don't want to do that. I'm going to give them some synthetic milk. This thing about pain avoidance culture, opiates culture, marijuana culture, drug culture, modern medicine culture, it's not working out. It's not working out for who we are biologically. Women need to go through, look, you got to have the baby at home. I'm sorry people don't want to hear that. People think, oh, but child mortality and, the mortality of the mother, infant mortality rates, you got to have the baby at home. You can have a midwife, or you can have someone come to the home and help the process and make sure everything goes well. Doing it in the hospital, I don't know. If you do go to the hospital and you just ignore what I'm saying, you argue with me, you go to the hospital, you can't be taking painkillers. You can't be doing a C-section just because, oh, well, this really hurts a lot. No. You got to go through the process. The process is there for a reason, right? It's in the Bible for a reason. You got to go through the process. And the process, you think, oh, this is painful. I just want to avoid pain. It's like, no, pain is what creates military cohesion. You go through boot camp together and you're like, well, that sucked. Now we're going to die for each other because you've gone through that mutual pain. You have a hazing in fraternities. Oh, I was hazed to get into this fraternity. Now I love this fraternity and I'm going to support it in every way that I can. So everywhere in human life, we see that pain always produces something good. Pain produces big muscles. Pain produces the military. Pain produces fraternities. Pain produces the love between a mother and her child. Pain produces breast milk, which is very good for children. And as we take away these things, and we have C-sections, and we have artificial milk that we give to babies, we're just seeing terrible results. And it's all bad all around. So milk, dairy is an important topic. It's an important topic. Let's get back to Brian G. How vital molds and other fungi are to healthy soil and land? True. But let's flee to the forest, not just the forest, but the prairie, the plains, the semi-arid, and even desert lands. Why not trade in our grass lawns for at least some elements of the beautiful lands in which we live? I guess everyone has a grass lawn, and it is simply what one does. But it might be nice to do something different. But what would the neighbors think? Uh-oh. Have I brushed up even slightly against the question of free will? I don't suppose the plants act with reason, at least not as we do. The forest fights for sunlight, that takes root in every tree. But I agree they act with morality as you described, so we see competition, self-serving behavior, morality, and immorality, but perhaps without free will. But what about us? I'm not familiar enough with Schopenhauer to wander these woods just yet. I don't know that Schopenhauer has a huge deal to say. Maybe he does have a huge deal to say about free will, and I'm just sort of ignoring that because I haven't read him. I say you should read him because people ask me, they say, what book should I read? You're so smart. What book? First of all, I'm not that smart. But second of all, read Schopenhauer. But third of all, I haven't read Schopenhauer. I tried. I really did try. I tried to listen to the audiobook. I tried all sorts of things. But then I just was like, I got the gist. Once I feel like I got the gist, I move on. I'm like, I got the gist. I don't need to read See, to me, the reason you read a book in its entirety is because either you really like the writing style, or number two is because there's some kind of it's part of a ritual. Like you read the Bible to be a Christian. Okay, I get it. Even after I get the gist of salvation, everything, you put in the work because it's part of joining the club. So I understand, or you have to read the whole of Torah to be a Jew, a Jewish man, or, there's all kinds of book reading requirements out there. So I get that. Read the book to become part of the book club. I get that. Unless there's a Schopenhauer book club out there that is cool and has cool membership perks like, free gym and, something like that. Unless that comes around, and I see we're turning yellow. I see that's a function of the blue light, anti-blue light protection that our computer has, which is good. But I'm also a little bit yellow, which it's not as bright. It's not as bright and cheerful as we might. Is there a way we can fix that in the settings? Let's put a bookmark in this conversation. Who remembers that? Who remembers 2014? Hello? 2014 department? Was anyone there for that? Does anyone remember? Energy, is it under Energy Saver? No, it's not under Energy Saver. Is it under Displays? Is it, oh, Night Shift. Oh, baby. Do you feel that night shift? Now I'm going to be up all night and I'm going to be depressed from blue light. But I do it for you. I do it for the sake of the visual quality of the video. You see that throughout the video, these stress lines that I have, I've disappeared. Now I just have this Neanderthal brow ridge going on, which is really strange. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. It is Schrodinger's brow ridge. My facial features, they change like the cycles of the moon, right? So Brian G., he brings up Schopenhauer. I would suggest reading him. If you like reading books, if you're a big book reader, if you are a BBR, a big book reader, then or a consumer. No, we don't do that. We do not do obelisk respecting. We don't do that on this channel. I apologize. I apologize. We got too carried away. The spirit of the moment. We were not constrained by peros, which is morality. Peros, the constraining principle, is what keeps things beautiful and what keeps things good. So yeah, read books. I don't read books, but you should read books. Haven't read books in a few years. I read the introduction. I read the introduction to the Pythagorean source book. I got through the introduction, and then I was like, I got the gist. Once I get the gist, again, what's the point of suffering through the rest of the thing except to join a club? That's the only reason I would see the reason to do that. So Ziv Fuchs says real Brahmin vibes. Mr. Coolmug says a Vignet. I don't think it's I think it's a Vignet. See, we're just seeing how many words I don't know how to pronounce today. A Vignet and a Veer got together, created a veneer. George Carvlin, not Carlin, but Carvlin, who I'm already subscribed to. I basically like to try to keep abreast. I don't like to keep up on people who are big. I don't like to follow big channels. I like to follow let's see how many power yoga. I like to see what playlists people have. George Carvlin. I am his one subscriber, and he has a Sarah Bell power yoga. And maybe we're going to learn from George Carvlin, and maybe we are going to learn about power yoga. Although I don't really like to watch women do yoga. I know, doesn't that make me someone who is homosexual? Doesn't that make me someone who is attracted to men if I don't like to watch women do yoga? But to me, it's just, I don't know, the vibe of it. It's just, it's like, to me, it seems insidious. When a woman is, like, doing some kind of workout or something, I'm like, shouldn't you be, like, having kids or something? Like, isn't that your workout? Like, running around, like, cooking food, or like working in the fields or something. Like, I'm not opposed to women working. That's what distinguishes me from these trad types. I have no problem with women in the workforce. The Jocko Pod, stealing my name. Let's see, how long has the Jocko podcast been around? Jocko podcast, 2015. Okay, that was before our time. Is that something I can say? That's where we got the name, the Jocko podcast. I don't know, pretty similar stuff. We've got to subscribe to Moritz. I'm familiar with Moritz. He uploaded something 2 months ago, so we've got to keep up with Moritz, see what he's doing, keep on him, understand what's going on with Moritz, and make sure that we are still frequenting that. We've got Universal Man. I'm just going through your subscriptions, and I'll just subscribe. Here's what I'll do. I'll subscribe. It's kind of like putting a bookmark in it. I'll put a bookmark in a channel, and then I'm gonna get it pop up in my subscriptions. I'm gonna watch a video, I'm gonna say this is terrible, and then I'm gonna unsubscribe, which probably hurts that person's metrics, which probably is not good for that person's metrics. It's kind of a bad thing. It's not very nice to do, but you know, I'm just subscribing so I can unsubscribe later. So that's a little something we got from George Carlin. Admiral Marat, our residential Messianic Jew, says that I am in mug mode. I don't know what that is. I think you're going to have to ask Mr. Cool Mug. He is the official authority on what mug mode actually is, what it really means to be in mug mode. We're looking through. I like to see when people like my videos, just so I can see, okay, what other kind of videos are they liking at the same time or around the same time. And that's always it's always interesting to see the kind of different aspects that people are interested in. Oh goodness, we're gonna skip over that. Menthol gold. When God implanted himself in the bush, it burst into flames. True. I mean, I don't think that's significant. Implant. That's what plants do. They plant themselves in the ground. They are not in the sky. They are not like the spores or the seeds of the dandelion, which are just in the sky, but they are in the ground. So that is the nature of plants. They are in things. So yes, he implants himself into the burning bush. And that's all the comments we had for the plant podcast. Well, the name is not, I say that the plant episode of the Mr. Cool Mug podcast. So that was today. We talked about some things. We went through some stuff. And, you know, what is a form of peras is me forcing myself to do this podcast, because instead I could be languishing. I could be suffering ennui. I could be depressed. I could be scared. I could be shy. I could be like, ooh, I'm shy. I'm scared. You know, I'm hesitant, because editing the videos is a lot of work. So if I say something wrong, it's not a live stream, but it might as well be, right? It might as well be. The thing I don't like about live streams is I think it encourages superficial comments, and I just hate it. I hate superficial comments. I like deep comments. And live streams encourage, by their nature, they encourage the most superficial comments. And I think there's something wrong with that. I think the principle of Peras says we should limit our comments to only that which is essential and beautiful. I only want beautiful comments. I don't want superficial. I want deep. I want each comment to be like its own universe, its own I want each comment to be novel length. I want each comment, I think every person, in an ideal podcast, the Mr. Cool Mug podcast will reach its zenith when each commenter only gets to comment once. You only get to choose one. I mean, if I could imagine, if I was in charge of YouTube, imagine if YouTube was like an open platform where you could just customize the rules of your channel. Like your channel is like a game, and you can just customize the rules. Like, I'm the dungeon master. I am the dungeon master of the Mr. Cool Mug podcast, and I just get to change the rules as I want to. And so essentially each commenter can only leave one comment. And in order to leave another comment, they have to delete the previous comment. Or there's some kind of penalty, you know, maybe a point system. And so basically you have one chance to make a good comment. And so each comment would be like, here's my autobiography, here's my life story, here's my basic philosophy, here's what I think about this podcast at large, here's what I think about this video, and here's what I think about this particular thing. I mean, each comment would just be novel length. It would be beautiful. There would be so much effort put into it. We would get camaraderie out of that. It would give meaning to our lives. It would be a beautiful thing. So we would like to see that. Unfortunately, we can't have that. But certainly, the problem I have with live streams is not that I'm going to say something stupid. I do that anyway. I make videos and stupid things happen, and then I put it out there, and it is what it is, right? It's just the raw. It's just the raw, it's like raw milk. You know, there's no pasteurization process. I don't have an editor. It's just raw. And you have to eat it raw. It's like raw ginger, raw garlic, raw onions. And we're going to talk about foods at some point, but you know, maybe not in this one. Maybe we'll hold off on talking about foods. But someday we're going to talk about foods. You know it's coming. You know, the season is here. We're getting into the season of candy eating, Halloween, another evil holiday. You know, Christmas has been stolen from us. It's now a holiday of commercialism and gift giving, which is just consumerism. So we now hate Christmas. You know, it's like it went from Yule, this pre-Christian thing that we all love, and then it became Christian. It's like, okay, we still love it. But then they took it again, and they made it into this horrible consumerist thing. So now we have to hate Christmas. And we have to hate Halloween. Again, Halloween, you can say that there's some cool elements in Halloween. But now it's about bad diets. It is about sexualized costumes. It is about, and maybe you need that. Maybe you need sort of a Mardi Gras day where everyone just kind of goes crazy. Maybe people need that. Maybe that is a way to let off steam and to keep a healthy cult. Maybe you have to have some kind of balance between peros and iperon. Maybe you need that. But I don't know, Halloween, candy itself, it's all chemicals. Why not just eat some honey or something? Why not just take a bottle of honey and just start drinking honey? You know, why are you going to eat all this processed corn syrup? Has estrogens. Corn syrup has pesticides. Don't have corn syrup. Don't consume corn syrup. Just have like raw honey or something. Just eat raw honey. I don't know. Eat some dates. Eat some dried fruits. But we're going to talk about food at some point. It's been there for years now. Ever since we did, the OGs will remember. The real Jockolites will remember back in the day. They remember when this was a food-centered channel. And still, they call me broccoli. They call me broccoli head. And it's not just because of my hair, but because broccoli is an important part of the diet. That actually helps remove xenoestrogens from your body. So, you know, foods are important, and that's always in the back of our, it's up there in the clouds, and someday we'll reach that. It's always there for us. It's always there when you need it. The food's a classic topic. You could make this entire channel could just be dedicated to food, but, you know, it is a variety show, right? We do like to keep things, a little bit. And here's another thing. YouTube's introduced this thing called comments I haven't responded to. Which, okay, if we can filter by that, can we see comments I haven't viewed? Because sometimes people will respond to a comment that is not years old, but months old, and I'm never going to see it because it's a response to a comment. So there's no way for me to get any kind of notification that you've left a comment if it is a response to something that was a comment from weeks or months ago. So there is absolutely no way. I wish there was some kind of feature. I don't know. How about just sort? Is there a way to sort by what's going on here? Just sort by age of the comment, because really it sorts everything by the main comment, and then the responses are just counted as if they're as old as the main. So we have problems. We have issues. YouTube, it's not good. You'd think if you had Google on your side, but that's the thing. They don't want dungeon masters. They want to be the dungeon master. What's her name? Susan, she wants to be the only dungeon master. She doesn't want any other dungeon masters. So, that's the thing. There can only be one. There can only be one Susan Wojcicki dungeon master. Masker? Where is this coming from? Master. She can only be the only dungeon master. And, therefore we can't We can't make our YouTube channel like our MySpace page. We can't customize it to our heart's desire, which is sad. It is a bit sad. It is, we're having a good time, but we're enjoying it while it's lasting. Nothing is eternal in this world. Maybe God is eternal, but nothing is eternal in this world. Oh yeah, that's something I should have said. I should have said the relationship between God is infinite, but then like Jesus is supposed to be humble before God, so he represents peros. But then there's also aspects where he's like breaking the old law, and the old, like Judaism and the old law represents peros. But then also out of that you get growth in power. So there's this cycle between peros as a moral principle, and then eternity, infinity, and perfection as moral principles of, you could say the infinitude of those things, of those aspects, versus the finitude of peros and the the whole cycle of morality there. So we're having good times. I'm just scrolling through the comments. I've been scrolling for a while now, and I'm on like month 2, and I'm like, this wasn't even that long ago. Like now I'm at month 3, and I'm like, 3 months was just not that long ago. So why does YouTube suck so much? And why do you have to load like a picture of the thumbnail and the title of the video and an avatar of the person? Like, I don't know, this is worse than any forum software, because the way I view the YouTube comments should basically just be a forum. If you judge the YouTube comments software in accordance with any other comparable forum, it is literally the worst forum I have ever seen. It is literally the worst forum I have ever seen. It loads slowly. You can't, the dating of the comments in accordance with, as I said, the problem of replies is a huge issue. I don't know what to say. And also the fact that people are allowed to change their name is ridiculous. No forum would ever allow this. No good forum would ever allow you to change your name. You're stuck. You got to make a new account, buddy. You can't just change your name. That's confusing. And also the avatar. People who change their avatars, penalty for that one. I think forum culture has a good aspect to it that YouTube comment sections are just they're just upsetting. I'm on how did we get back to the beginning? Yeah, we got back to the Maldoror comment, which is the official first comment of the channel and probably will remain the first comment of the channel for a long time, for probably forever. The second one is again a big name changer. We're not even going to mention him. The third one is Brian Nagayan. That's the third comment on the channel. And that's from the post-blackpilling video. So, if that video ever goes down, then all of those comments will no longer be the first comments of the video. And that's just the way it goes. And that's just how the cookie crumbles, right? So, this has been a Mr. Cool Mug podcast. It's been enjoyable. I'm in that tired state where, do you ever get so tired that you're like too tired to go to bed? Because going to bed implies that you have the willpower to restrict your passion for your zest for life, which really would just mean like, you're addicted to internet browsing or worse, but you can't go to bed, and so it takes willpower. But when you get tired, your willpower weakens, because your conscious mind weakens and your primordial brain takes over, so you're like too tired to go to sleep. And that's kind of how I feel like right now. The sleep schedule, the life schedule, it's zany. It's zany, but that's, I think, the best videos. I think the best creativity comes out of zany. It's like you have a zany, creative, chaotic life, and then you try to create something. And the process of creation is always peros. It's always construction. It's always eliminating the excess and getting down to something and some kind of product or whatever. And that's those two opposites. They do work together. We've made videos. And frankly, some of the videos, I've made some videos which were no video there was only audio. It was just total darkness, total black, and just talking. And I don't know if that's fit. I don't know if that's fit for this channel. I don't know if that's a good fit. But I'm trying to reiterate some of those themes, you know. And I guess it's not reiteration for you, but it's reiteration for me. You know, think about it. I have to listen to every single one of my videos. I have to listen to my words as I'm speaking them. That's I'm kind of breaking some kind of fourth wall here. I'm like stepping outside. It's like an out-of-body experience. I'm having an out-of-body experience where I'm listening to my own words as I speak them. That's weird, guys. This is weird. This is what happens when I get a little bit too tired. This is what happens when the sleep schedule is a little bit messed up, is we can't quite end the video, so we just have to say thanks for listening. I will be with you next time. Goodbye.